Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum. My name is Hizam Kadir and I'm from Malaysia Digital Economy Corporations here in Kuala Lumpur, or to be specific, in Cyberjaya, outside of Kuala Lumpur. I'm actually very delighted to be in the company of today's high-powered speakers. Looking at the list, and these are esteemed panelists who really know the industry and who really know how the advancements of Islamic fintech would then be able to move and change the world. In the interest of getting every panelist to come and join, maybe we'll start by having each and every one of you to do a very quick introductions of yourself, tell where you come from, as well as what do you do in your organization. Maybe we'll start with ladies first. There are two ladies in the panel. We'll start with Ms. Farah Jafar, and we'll go to Ms. Stella Cox with the rest of the panelists subsequently. So over to you, Farah, for quick introductions of yourself.
Thank you, Norhizam. It's a pleasure being here. My name is Farah. I represent Labuan IBFC, which is Malaysia's Midshore Centre. And my role as CEO at Labuan IBFC Incorporated is really to create better awareness and understanding of the jurisdiction. On behalf of Labuan Financial Services Authority, who is our parent company and a statutory body under the Minister of Finance of Malaysia. Thank you.
Thank you, Farah. Ms. Stella Cox, would you be able to introduce yourself a bit?
I'm Stella Cox. I'm Managing Director of DidiCap Group, based in London in the UK. UK committees, including some UK government task force. And I also, most relevant to this session, sit on the UK Islamic Fintech panel. Thank you.
Thank you, Stella. Brother Shaybilahan.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I should say good afternoon to everybody. I don't know if it's afternoon or morning, wherever you are, but nice to meet and meet and reacquaint myself with everybody. I wear a number of hats like the other speakers. I won't bore you with the details. For the purpose of this particular presentation, I am Chief Islamic Finance Officer for AIFC, Astana International Financial Center, and I sit on the FinTech Academy board here as well as a few other initiatives, which I will touch on when we speak.
Thank you. And Pa Afdal, great to be meeting you virtually again. Do you want to, for the interest of the audience, maybe give a bit of introductions of your organizations and yourself?
Okay, thank you. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Afdal Ali Azhar from Indonesia, from Jakarta, Indonesia. I'm representing the National Committee of Islamic Economy and Finance. So this is a very special committee, independent, chaired directly by our presidents. The goal is to improve the Islamic economy in Indonesia. Now I'm as a director for the halal industry development.
Thank you so much. So the topic of today's discussions was briefed by the organizers for us to be discussing about growth of Islamic fintech and how intercontinental bridges can be built. That's pretty wide topic. And when we zoom it down and looking at the opportunities in the global Islamic fintech market, reports have said that it is expected to reach 3.5 trillion US dollars in assets by 2024. But at the same time as well, when you look at growth of Islamic fintech or Islamic finance, there's still some level of inequality and non-inclusivity that varies from one country to another. The aim of today's discussions is perhaps if we can have wisdoms from all the esteemed panelists to discuss about how Islamic fintech can play a more effective role as solutions to address these inclusivity challenges. And at the same time as well, and looking at cross-continent collaborative efforts, and the key words is collaboration, to look into how access to capital can be improved, talent development, education, and regulatory work across the globe. The questions is really about how Islamic fintech developments spanning across all these parts of the world in the globe can be realized as a truly global phenomenon in years to come. So with that, maybe since Brother Aiman just joined, if I'll hand it over to Brother Aiman to do a bit of introduction of yourself, and maybe to give 5 minutes overview of your presentation on this topic. Yeah, and then we can move from one speaker to another. Housekeeping, I think I'm concerned of the time as well. If it can be quick, within 5 minutes for you to be presenting, and we'll open it up for question and answers and brainstorming sessions after that. So, Brother Aiman, if you can, over to you.
Thank you very much. It's a great honor to be with you on this webinar. It's a global, as you have mentioned, fintech is definitely going to help us to be global. ICD is an entity that's part of an Islamic Development Bank. ICD is an Islamic corporation of the private sector development. We enable within 55 member countries. We do have 5 business lines. We issue a debt capital market. We manage treasury funds. We go and provide line of finance. We do asset management, and we have 119 financial institutions in our network. So we created a platform within our network in order to support the 119 financial institutions and get them to serve the countries that they're in a much easier way and in communication with us. So by saying so, this was a quick introduction for ICD. In regards to the question of how to seek or create or navigate our Islamic fintech opportunities, despite the spotlight on fintech in recent years and its global impact on the provision of the financial services, digital innovation in the Islamic finance services industry has been relatively slow compared to its conventional counterparts. There has been a shortage of Sharia-compliant alternatives to meet the increased demand for wealth management, investment, insurance, and banking products that offer easier access, faster and more cost-effective delivery, and greater transparency. Amid the current pandemic and competing in the digital era, the case is compelling for Islamic banks to take on a more prominent role in the fintech ecosystem. The digital capacity and capabilities provide an added advantage considering Islamic banks are generally smaller than conventional counterparts in terms of resources and distribution network, with high fixed costs pumping and putting together Sharia-compliant lenders at disadvantage due to their relative lack of scale. Indeed, it makes sense for Islamic banks to have a digital focus to remain competitive. The opportunity have already presented itself. The technology is ripe with high penetration of mobile and internet across the markets around the world. Consumers are also becoming more and more tech savvy. Increasingly, financial inclusions via fintech, the rapid update of mobile wallets indicates that African consumers are readily accepting digital technology. And an increase in urban literacy and young populations, as well as a segment of consumers and small and medium-sized enterprises, SMEs, underserved by the traditional banking solutions. Innovation with the Islamic social financial space can also assist to address a number of issues facing Ummah and society at large. Waqf, Sadaqah, and Zakat have large potential to become important additional sources of financials for people in need of aid, especially in this pandemic. And technology is a powerful tool to widen access to outreach to these social financial instruments. It is critical to highlight that an enabling environment is important to facilitate this innovation process in the Islamic financials. Malaysia is issuing fintech regulatory sandbox framework in 2016. Similarly, in 2016, Abu Dhabi Global Market launched its fintech regulatory laboratories. Saudi Arabia has also established its own sandbox, and as well, Central Bank of Bahrain have done the same. So the establishment of computer environments and acceleration program will also pave the way for the development of Islamic fintech. IFIs can also focus on specialization and out-of-the-box solution in business segments that cannot be easily replicated by non-traditional players to gain competitive advantage. So this is in lump sum of what we think of within ICD.
Thank you so much, Brother Ayman.
Thank you.
And we would like to welcome Dr. Tariq Akin from Presidency of Turkey's office. Welcome, Dr. Tariq. How are you?
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Yeah, in the end, I am in.
Salam.
Alhamdulillah, I am now very well. Salam to all of the participants.
Perhaps, Dr. Tariq, if you can give a quick introductions of yourself,
Sure.
and within about 5 minutes, if you can give a view about the growth of Islamic fintech and how Intercontinental bridges can then further increase inclusivity of Islamic fintech adoptions across the world.
Sure. A very short introduction about me. I am the Division Director at Finance Office of the Presidency of Turkey. I'm actually the Islamic finance leader here. And we are doing many things here. My background is indeed from economics. I have a BA in economics from Kent University, a master's degree from Harvard University. Then I went to Malaysia to do my PhD at INSAFE. My main research interests are Islamic capital markets, inequality and redistribution, as well as SME finance. With your permission, I want to start my talk. Inshallah, I will do it in 5 minutes. I want to start by introducing the Finance Office, which is the FinTech coordination unit and responsible for establishing the FinTech ecosystem in Turkey. I will a bit talk about Finance Office, since this will help the audience and guests know about Turkey's ambition for becoming an Islamic FinTech hub. The new presidential system of government was introduced in 2018. With this new system, 4 new offices have been established to secure faster and more strategic decision-making process in governance. The offices are directly tied to the president himself. And Finance Office is one of these 4 offices. There are several assigned responsibilities of the Finance Office. One is observing developments and conducting research on financial sector and directly reporting to the president. Also developing new financial instruments, especially on Islamic finance. We also will, inshallah, attract international financial flows to Turkey. Also, we will develop, this is important, we will also develop the financial strategy of Turkey, including Islamic finance, fintech, and conventional finance. Finally, the Finance Office is the sole authority in managing and conducting the Istanbul Finance Center project. The Istanbul Finance Center project aims at making Istanbul a regional and then a global financial center. Let me underline here the fact that Istanbul Finance Center project is based on 2 main pillars. One is Islamic finance or participation finance, another one is fintech. It means the bulk of our agenda in making Istanbul a global financial center consists of Islamic finance and fintech. In this regard, Islamic fintech is an important area of combination of the pillars of the Istanbul Financial Center project. Indeed, we want the Istanbul Finance Center to be a regional as well as a global hub in Islamic fintech. Coming back to the topic of this session, I will mention about and explain the main initiatives by Finance Office and the government of Turkey to ensure Islamic fintech's access to capital, development of talent, customer education, and regulation. We believe that thanks to these initiatives, Islamic fintech will be a catalyst for the success of Istanbul Finance Center project in the near future. Among others, the fintech strategy of the Finance Office is mainly based on 4 sequential policy initiatives. Firstly, we are working on writing the national fintech strategy documents. Secondly, we are working on establishing a fintech ecosystem. Since fintech firms are the gist of this ecosystem, we are closely working with them. There is a close cooperation and mutual understanding with these firms. New technologies and tools that enable innovation, telecom and technology companies that create infrastructure for distribution, startups that create innovative businesses are all elements of this ecosystem. Thirdly, I think this is also an important initiative. We are working on establishing the finance and technology base, which has unique features and possibly be the first of its kind. This is a very important and maybe pioneering initiative. Let me highlight that this is not a technopark, but something much more comprehensive. Finally, we will develop a system to mobilize effective, adequate, and to the point fintech funds for the startups. These are the main steps we have taken to create and navigate Islamic fintech opportunities in Turkey. We believe through Istanbul Financial Center project, we will help Islamic fintech to be a global phenomenon. Thank you. I hope I stayed within the time limits. This is all I want to say for now.
Very well within the time limit. Thank you so much, Dr. Tariq.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Yes, from Turkey, and it's great to have speakers from all around the world. From Turkey, maybe we move to Indonesia, Pak Rafdal, and you are a very well-renowned person within the region that has been championing Islamic finance and focusing on Islamic finance as a form of inclusivity. Share with us your views on the opportunities around Islamic fintech and the opportunities across maybe perhaps ASEAN.
Okay. Thank you, Brother Norhizam. Please allow me to share some presentations. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you for the invitation to talk about the fintech, the growth of Islamic fintech, especially for fintech in Indonesia. So let me start with the overview of the Islamic economy development in Indonesia. In 2015, we launched the Islamic financial architecture for the Islamic finance. And then after that, we established what we call the KNIKS. This is like a milestone of Indonesia development for the Islamic economy. The committee is to enhance the Islamic finance development in Indonesia, chaired directly by the president. Now is like a daily chairman is our vice president to manage this committee. First, we start with the Islamic finance developments. But then recently we aware that we cannot only boost the Islamic finance, but we need to look at the economy transactions, because finance is only the result of the economy. So after that, we developed what we call that master plan for the Islamic economy. And by the end of 2019, we have an implementation plan for the Islamic economy development. Early this year, we changed the committee to become the National Committee of Islamic Economy and Finance. You can see now we have many improvements about Islamic finance and also Islamic economy in Indonesia. But I want to start a bit more about the fintech technology. Islamic finance in Indonesia, the potential is very huge. We have a very huge market for the Islamic economy, Islamic finance itself, but the growing still small compared to the conventional one. Maybe if we compare to Malaysia, our Islamic financial shares is still about almost 9% from the total financial asset in Indonesia. But I want to share with you for the Islamic Economy Development Master Plan, we have strengthening digital economy as one of the big pillars to improve the Islamic economy in Indonesia. So we realized the important things of the technology, of the future of the transaction, how people interact with the internet, do the transaction online, and all this stuff related to the technology. So that's why we want Islamic finance, Islamic economy in Indonesia, not only to be traditional, but must be updated with the new technology approach. So what we do, we launched the first digital payment, Islamic, comply with the Sharia rules. So this is the first and the only one as now in Indonesia, digital payment. So the difference of digital payment in here, the ecosystem of the finance is still keeping the Islamic banking, Islamic financial institutions ecosystem. So we try to keep the money in the Islamic ecosystem, try to boost the improvement so people can use the digital payment for the daily transactions and for the transportations, to buy a lot of things, to pay a lot of things, and collaborations with the most for the many like zakat payment, wakaf payment, and also with all the stakeholders, including educations, marketplace, and many things. So we understand that we want to change how people transaction the Islamic economy. So let's start with the digital payment, which comply with Sharia. And then we also, what we do, we ask the marketplace that's already in Indonesia to create the segment for the Islamic, for the Sharia segment. First, we asked Tokopedia, and then they see this is very interesting opportunity. So they launched what they call the Tokopedia Salam. And then Blibli, Bukareksa, Shopee, and many marketplaces in Indonesia now trying to improve the transactions in the Islamic finance segments, Sharia segment for the Islamic economy segments. I want to give you the numbers. For example, like Tokopedia, in 2019, the transaction in Tokopedia is about 1.5% from Indonesia GDP. And now, during this pandemic, the market transaction, the marketplace transaction improved maybe 4 times or 5 times compared to the last year. It's very huge improvement. And Alhamdulillah, we have a Sharia segment there. Sharia who sell the halal product to give the investment for the Islamic opportunity improve.
Yeah. Pak I'm sorry to interrupt actually. If you can sum up in the interest of time.
Yep, thank you. And lastly, we just introduced the halal traceability, the use of the blockchain for the halal implementation for the pottery in Indonesia. I think the many improvement, the key success factor because of the strong support from the governments, collaborations with the private parties, and the halal lifestyle developed in Indonesia, and also the very important things, the market players, the manufacturers, they are understand about the requirement of the market. Market want the halal product. So that's why they keep trying to improve. I think that's the future. We want to have an Islamic digital bank, halal traceability, and also collaboration with all the local players.
Wonderful.
Thank you very much. Then we can discuss later. Thank you.
Thank you. Walaikum salam. All right. We'll hand it over to Ms. Farah.
You know, I think the conversation we're having is very, very interesting because of 2 things. Number one, Islamic finance is something, or Islamic financial services and intermediation is something that Labuan obviously has a very, very long history in. We are home to the world's first suku, huge Islamic base, part of Malaysia, definitely key, right? Our approach to digital finance, and I'm taking one step out here from just fintech, because our approach is not just about fintech. As a jurisdiction, our focus is DLT, is blockchain technology. And really, in a way, it's about the approach towards DLT in our licensing regime. So the way we look at it is that Islamic finance and digital technology is a choice that entities make. It's a choice whether you would like to be Sharia compliant or not, inclusive. It's a choice whether you want to take the digital route in doing something or not, right? So the approach of putting both together is something we are very, very excited about. As a digital, so I don't need to dwell too much about Labuan as a Islamic hub, okay? But Labuan as a digital hub, I think is something that we need to talk a little bit more about. I think my fellow panelists and also those of you watching will be quite surprised to know that as of June this year, we have licensed 40 digital players already.
40.
So we have 2 digital security asset exchanges. One is Pusang Exchange that is already going to be listing its first digital asset soon, called Spice. And then recently, in the last month or so, we've licensed Gibraltar Exchange to come into Asia. So they have Gibraltar, already has an exchange in Gibraltar. Obviously, they've chosen Labuan as their Asian hub. And what's interesting about Gibraltar, GSX, is that they're very much into into financial inclusion. And in a lot of ways, I think the issue of Islamic and fintech, inclusion of fintech, and the issue of fintech and financial inclusion, they are maybe the 3 sides to the same coin, as it were. So out of the 40 licenses, because our approach to, so I'll go back a little bit to our digital licenses. Our approach to digital finance is that every single license that we have being offered in Labuan can be a digital license, okay? Because it's a business process. As a wholesale financial center, we are very much focused on the business process, and we are very much focused on the regulatory stringentness of the businesses, and we are very much focused on licensed intermediaries. So the focus is very much on the fact that if you want to have a digital license, you can. You just need to ensure that the regulator is satisfied with your business process, the stringentness of it, and that it meets the regulatory processes and international standards. So we have 40 licenses. We have credit token licenses, which people use for STOs. We have money broking licenses, what people use for crypto exchanges. We have payment gateway approvals. We have SPVs, we have private equities, we have partnerships. And the beauty of it is that not only is it tax efficient, it's also regulatory and currency neutral. So you could, for example, and this is something I said in Turkey when I was there last year, was that you could have everything in Turkish lira licensed in Labuan, operating globally and meeting international standards, right? So the thing about fintech is that, or digital business, is that it doesn't, and I use this word very, very loosely, respect boundaries. And that's why box standard geographical based regulators struggle with it. Where's the client onboarded? How do you do eKYC? How does this work? And the advantage of Labuan is that as a wholesale center, we're able to sit down with prospective license holders and say, walk us through your system, walk us through your client onboarding. And then we go away and do our DD on that. You know? So in that sense, we're in a sweet spot. But it's important to understand that Islamic finance and fintech, personally for me anyway, is a natural combination. And the best way for us, to go back to the title, I guess, and stop the Labuan pitch, the title of this panel is, building bridges. And I think the best way to start building bridges is to start with things that are quite standardized within the Sharia landscape. And I'll give you an example of that. So when it comes to fintech or DFIN, or and I don't even begin to pretend that I understand this business, okay? Because it's all going too fast for me anyway. Regardless of what it is, the fintech business and the digital community are extremely united. they are united in their sharing, they are united in their openness. The flip side to that is that Sharia acceptability is a little bit more fragmented. So if we started merging digital and aspects of Sharia that are universal, then you're going to get very quick wins, right? So the example that comes to mind immediately is the proof of concept that's being done by the Labuan Financial Exchange at the moment, Project Pankor, well, it's done by Gibraltar Stock hashtags and Labuan Exchange, and it's called Project Harbour. Sorry, I was going to say Project Rubin. Wrong jurisdiction.
Wrong country.
So the crux of this is that a sukuk or a bond is a very standard contract. So the adaptability and the acceptability of it can be quickly achieved. And all you have to do is appreciate that the digital aspect of it lies on top of it. And so we have a quick win. And I guess that's all I have to say about that. Thank you very much.
To all the quick wins. Thank you. And last but not least, Brother Sheikh, my apologies for having you to speak last, but I'm sure that you'll be able to bring exciting views on growing the Islamic fintech. So over to you, Sheikh.
Assalamu alaikum and afternoon, everybody. Thank you for the opportunity once again, organizers, and it's very nice to be at the end of the queue, because I think it avoids me to duplicate or say the same things, and I'd like to pay homage to all the speakers. I think they've spoken very eloquently and have advocated the case for clearly for fintech for different regions. And I feel like I want to work more on the intercontinental aspect of the title, and particularly my continent where I'm sitting. And I think it's a natural fit. So I'm here on the ground in the Central Asian market in what you call, there's different titles to it. So there's CIS, there's the ex-Soviet Union bloc, Eurasian Economic Union, and Brother Tariq Akin will know that this is a former Turkic market. So the people from Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Uzbekistan, Tajikistan, Turkmenistan, all the stans are actually Turkic ethnically. So they can kind of, understand Turkey and Istanbul. I think and we have various, different agreements with different parts of the world, like the Eurasian Economic Union. Nobody actually talks about continents anymore. They're supercontinents. So you don't talk about Europe or Asia, you talk about Eurasia. Right, so this is where the world is going, and digital, as Ms. Farah's mentioned, transformation and DLT and other particular enablers will help us do that very quickly without all the kind of inefficiencies. I've had the good fortune of actually help create financial centers. So when Dr. Tariq mentions that there's the Istanbul Financial Center model, I've worked on the Astana International Financial Center, which is flourishing now. I'm also involved with the Tashkent Financial Center in Uzbekistan. So more than happy to help with the Istanbul project if need be. I am a judge by profession, so I'm a British judge, international arbitrator, I have a partner international firm, also happen to be a Sharia scholar who understands Sharia aspects of it. And I want to go a step further and say we shouldn't just talk about Islamic fintech, right? I think because the whole point of finance was to enable the real economy. For me, it's a case of Islamic eco-fintech, right? And eco meaning the main economy. So that eco could be replaced by agribusiness. So Islamic agri-fintech, Islamic health fintech, Islamic education fintech. And the reason for that is, if you look at Kazakhstan, it's the top 10 export of raw and processed food, which is amazing. So if you look at net buyers in the OIC, Muslim world, then Egypt is the net buyer of the grain wheat, 13.3 million tons. Why isn't this being done intra-OIC? I'm just giving you one example of wheat. So if wheat is being processed and produced in Kazakhstan and mostly bought in certain countries like Egypt, why is it not happening? So obviously Egypt and other countries are buying their wheat from Brazil, Argentina, Australia, Canada. That's a problem in itself. Number two, we can use all the existing financial structures, whether it's sukuk, murabaha, insurance-based models, to do that. So we enable agri-food, whether it's investment, whether it's exporting, importing, through financial structures and through blockchain, digital enablers. This is where the game changer is. This is the future. The future isn't just doing a small bit of, replacing some financial contracts and calling it fintech. We will never chase and beat the game, which is happening in those that are taking the lead in fintech. Because unfortunately, Islamic finance has always been playing catch up. And in people who do catch up will never able to compete. This isn't just about survival, it's about competitiveness. And for that, if you look at the intra-OIC trade in health, in health tourism, in food and agriculture, in sports, if you like, all of these areas, we can enable that through Islamic finance structures, through digital offerings, and through Sharia law. That combination will give us a USP. We've created that in Kazakhstan. I sit on just like in OIC, there is a Islamic Development Bank group looks after the banking side of it. The OIC entity, which is for food security, is the Islamic Organization for Food Security. Their mandate is to look after the 57 OIC countries for food safety, food security. Imagine if we could use Islamic fintech-based model, the tech digital side, plus the financial, sukuk, banking, insurance, to do all of that. This is where the game changer is for me. And I think we want to look at that. I want to help with that. And we're doing a lot of trade with many countries. Very happy to work with Labuan because obviously I sit on the AIFC as the Chief Islamic Finance Officer, which, like Ms. Farah mentioned, AIFC, so there's financial centers in the world, and legally you can call them one of two types. You're either an enclave or you're a club. An enclave is where you actually restricted to their geography. So if you're a member in DIFC, you have to be in the territory of DIFC. Whereas Labuan or AIFC is more about being a member of the club, which doesn't have specific geographic boundaries. This helps actually for all of our, because your title about intercontinental bridges, this is where it comes useful. So there can be, agreements between Labuan and AIFC, between Turkey, what our brother Tariq is doing. We can create these bridges, use digital technology to enable that. I want to go into that in detail later on, maybe when we have Q&As and other things. Sure. But just to let you know, Islamic eco fintech. Islamic for me means not just Sharia law, but everything that's legal. So whether that's jurisdictional law, regulatory frameworks, tax, accounting, corporate governance, all of that comes into the legal Islamic side. Then you have eco, that's the real economy. Fin, which is the financial aspects. And then tech. And tech eventually should be something like blockchain. Let me give you an idea that I'm working on right now, which is amazing. And it's nowhere in the world happening. Look at the food industry, from supplier to buyers. Mm-hmm. We don't have any platform, let's say like Bloomberg, which allows you to track and trace and have an interface, a food balance between buyers and sellers. Imagine if we had that Bloomberg equivalent, whether it's cloud-based technology or eventually blockchain-based technology, which allows that ability to interact. This is where the efficiency will come. If you look at the food industry, the top 100 companies in the world, none of them are from the OIC Muslim countries. We're always chasing the game. So, I'm happy to answer more questions and obviously get involved with the discussion. Sure. But that's for my 2 pence worth.
Got it. Thank you, Brother Shay. I'm really humbled listening to each and every one of you as you provided different insights on how do you interpret Islamic fintech, and fintech plays the role of bridging continents and countries. And to echo what Brother Shay mentioned about fintech being the enabler to the real economy, and taking what Ms. Farah said with regards to tech, somehow or other not respecting boundaries, and looking into technology itself as an infrastructure worldwide, with an exception of some underdeveloped markets. Largely, the reach of technologies have grown quite significantly. Loosely putting into the context of Islamic fintech, and I'm really aware right now of what Brother Shay said earlier with regards to interpretations of Islamic fintech. How do you view Islamic fintech plays a role in ensuring inclusivity among the ummah, the whole entire world, be it the underserved, be it the bottom 40s economy, be it the micro SMEs? Because right now, as we mentioned earlier, we spoke a lot about opportunities using technologies, blockchain, the distributed ledger technologies. But does it really reach the overall ummah and the whole entire Muslim populations and leveraging on technologies in really reaching out to the underserved community? Maybe I'll start with Pa Afdal, and given Indonesia has a large Muslims population, what's your view on this? And is it really catering to the tier 1 markets? And do you see this only reaching out to Muslim populations in Jakarta?
Okay. Actually, for Indonesia, for us, talking about fintech, we're not only talking about how we provide the capital, but we're talking about how technology can improve the transaction in the market. So we look at people now, they change the way how to buy transportation, buy food, do the payment for the zakat. So from that kind things, we understand the number of gadget ownership in Indonesia now is become very huge, and we have a very big population. So I think the initiative to build the digital payment that can be used by all the society, not only for the middle market, but also can be we can use for the zakat distributions. So the digital now becomes very common in Indonesia. During the pandemic, zakat can be distributed using the technology. So people no need to queue the malls to in the grocery store. So the use of the technology, I think, is very, very important. So that's why we want to link the important things, the transaction, the economy, what are the needs in the society, the needs for the market transactions, what we call the transportations, marketplace. And now, if you look at the Indonesia marketplace transaction improved very, very high. So everybody buy online. So we want Islamic finance also go improve because of this condition. So that's why we need to provide the alternative for the Islamic financial through the technology, so they can choose the alternative product for the society.
Got it. Thank you so much, Pa Afdal. Taking from what you said with regards to utilizing the existing financial instruments like zakat and sadaqah and taking into a digital platform, Brother Sheikh, earlier you mentioned about Intercontinental, the existing usage of Islamic financial instruments, for example, and marrying it with technologies. And do you see, you mentioned about this implementations only happens within specific political or geographical regions. How do you see this? You probably would have an opportunity because you mentioned all these TAN and Kazakhstan and all the TAN countries in the world right now. Do you see that how there could be one regulated common marketplace, a common platform that can then really unite and have one single regulation to be able to facilitate this concept? In fact, there's a question from Mr. Burhan Ali in asking questions about are there currently any efforts to have to set up an Islamic common market?
Okay, I think the questions about standardization and harmonization have been flying around for a long time, whether that's in the regulatory space, licensing, whether it's in actual underlying legal contracts, whether it's Sharia law, because obviously people have problems with lack of standardization. I think the industry, Islamic finance industry, has come a long way in terms of standardization. We have many bodies that have done that, whether that's in Bahrain through IOFI, whether it's your Malaysia in terms of IFSB and other bodies. We've got a lot of basic standard contracts and templates. And if you look at it as lawyers, whenever there's Islamic finance deals happening around the world, whichever subsector of Islamic finance, they tend to have existing templates, legal contracts which are used. So that level of standardization has happened already. Harmonization, I think, will happen through intra-country, kind of body deals and treaties. And if, like me and Sister Miss Farah is talking about, if there are more bodies that join together, join hands, we can do that level of harmonization. But ultimately, I think whether we as bodies do it or don't do it, the digital world is going there, right? Because the blockchain, DLT technology will take you there. We will be left behind if we don't do that. And I think technology, the whole point is disintermediation. The whole point is to get rid of all the problems. So I think where we should look at, really, the focus should be, Hizam, respectfully, is each part of the 4 blocks I mentioned. So Islamic, eco, fintech, each aspect should use blockchain in itself. That will automatically create harmonization in the industry worldwide, right? So let's look at, say, digital. So if we have digital-based Sharia contracts, you won't need Sharia scholars except for very, very complex matters. If you have blockchain-based legal contracts, Law Society of England and Wales is looking at that, by the way, having contracts which are blockchain-based, you won't have any problems in harmonization or disharmonization or lack of harmonization. and same with financial structures. The problem will be the financial services industry will fight this, because obviously banks will be out of the game. And that's why some of the banks are jumping on the bandwagon, trying to actually join this, or maybe, if I'm trying to be a bit of a cynic here, is hijack this and probably derail the whole thing. Because remember, let's go back a few decades, 4 or 5 decades, and I'm just speaking out candidly here. The whole industry of Islamic industry started off with Islamic economics. It wasn't banking, but it's been hijacked, not in any kind of negative way, but it's been taken over by the financial service industry. If we're not careful, it could happen to tech as well, because those that have financial muscle will take over this space and kind of maneuver it in a way which serves their interest. So what you're talking about, your question to Abdul Ali Asar, the whole thing about the fact that will this help the lower segments of society? And that can only happen if we leave the technology space to itself, because people are doing P2P, B2B, all of this work is going on, and you can see wallet-based technology, even neobanks, which don't even need any apps. So you don't need any apps at all with neobanks. You can do banking through WhatsApp. Imagine that. This level of transformation that's happening. So I feel it's for us as an industry, Islamic finance industry, our countries, respective jurisdictions, do we want to be part of this? If not, we will be left behind. So we're not actually the ones that are going to be able to shake and change this. We need to be part of this, because this is where the future is going. If you look at your kids or generations which are coming through now, 5-year-olds have got mobiles. My younger daughter knows how to switch on and go on to serve on things, which is, she's a 4-year-old. Right, and that will shock you. So if you can see that this is where the world is going, financial inclusion, social impact, SRI, banking, intra-OIC trade, all of these concepts and ideas can really change everything. The time has come now, and I want to leave you with this final kind of understanding. We don't need to have that level of capital access to be able to compete with Coca-Cola, to be able to compete with the big giants. You can do that through all the efficiencies on this tech. And this is the opportunity for new financial centers like Turkey and Istanbul to really build this in their core from day one. As Ms. Farah has mentioned about Labuan, you don't want to learn later on. You want to learn from the mistakes of other financial centers and build it from the start. I'll stop with that.
Got it. Okay. It's interesting that you paint the view of what's going to happen in the future. You highlighted examples of a kid in being able to be a digitally native person in maneuvering technology and making it so seamless in an example that you mentioned about making payments via WhatsApp as an example. Which brings me to, I'm interested in the view of Dr. Tariq coming from the President's office. And how do you approach this? The opportunities and advantages that technology offers. Should there be any form of restrictions, and what type of regulation should be in place? It's a bit contrasting right now, as we are as Brother Shay Bilal Khan is asking for less regulated environment, but as a country, regulations plays an important role as well in protecting the financial sovereignty of the country. What's your view on that, Dr. Tariq? How much regulation should be in place?
First of all, let me underline that in such a globalized world, no country alone can deal with or tackle the issues or prospective problems coming from fintech. So there needs to be a close cooperation between countries, but it does not mean a very restricted regulation. Look at Basel III after the global financial crisis. I mean, the global financial crisis mostly came from the irrespective behavior of the some financial giants or banking sector. I mean, they did not comply well with the regulations. And then Basel III came, tried to restrict some activities of the banking sector, such as very high, capital requirements. But over time, this is my personal view, by the way, this may also cause another kinds of problems for the banking sector, because they have to comply with the capital requirements. So they may be reluctant to give funds to the real sector or to take part in more risky activities. This was a kind of side effect of protecting the whole system to prevent systematic risk. So the same can also happen in fintech in future, or even near future. I think regulation is needed for fintech because it can go anywhere. I mean, we cannot even imagine where we can end up with the fintech, with liquidity of funds, so intercontinental, intercountry connections. However, it may not be so restricted because it will kill innovation. So one option could be to let the sector players design their own regulation, and given their needs, their requests from the policymakers to follow their requests. So instead of a top-down approach, the regulation may be designed by the sector players by themselves. Then, of course, there can be some unimaginable requests, some other things. But in the end of the day, any regulation mainly embodied or formed by the system players will be more compliant prone for the players themselves. That is what I want to say for now.
Got it. Thank you, Dr. Tariq. The questions for Farah, and this is from Ida Mok, who posted the questions on the question and answer column with regards to her observations on difficulties that already being faced by technology companies or finance services companies between a nascent fragmented space and regulations and compliance, which normally applies for only traditional offerings. And now we're talking about Islamic fintech and how this another layer of Islamic compliance complicates this whole thing even more. What's your view? Will it complicate things further, or does it run in parallel somehow? And how does Labuan IFC assist? And now that you have 40 digital licenses given, that's a great indicator that you are embracing and you're adopting and promoting digital companies. But with this Islamic finance coming in and another layer of Islamic compliance, how complicated does it get?
But that's the beauty of Islamic Sharia principles, isn't it? It is, in a way, as a legal person, it's the company's option and choice. We have a Sharia Supervisory Council in Labuan FSA, and they are able to then declare if something is Sharia compliant or not. Having said that, there is nothing stopping digital Islamic, an IFS digital entity from getting Sharia validation from any other advisory firm. So because we're legally agnostic, right, the duty to be Sharia compliant rests with the legal person. Again, it is the beauty that being a wholesale intermediation center provides, right? The fact is, the onus as an adult, quote unquote, the onus is on you, on the entity, to ensure that their own principles of Sharia governance are adhered to. We're not here to slap on a particular thinking, Sharia interpretation. No, we would like a global standard. Yes, that is. It's something that we all, as Muslims, should strive to, because at the end of the day, this is the only thing that's holding us behind. I think the non-recognition of different principles. So that's one thing. The second thing is, how difficult is it to run Islamic finance? It's not, right? So how is it more difficult to run a digital operations? It's not. So if you combine the two, what difference does it make? For me, it's just like making a cupcake, right? If you can put jam in it or you can put chocolate chip in it, it doesn't matter. The fintech bit is the chocolate chip. The cupcake is still the same, right? So I don't like looking at things negatively, number one. Number two, I also believe that because the digital space is so open, the ethos and the philosophy is open, it really is going to be the game changer for the acceptability of Islamic finance. It's the other way around, in my mind, right? Because the personalities within digital and within fintech are neutral. They're not cliquish in box standard financial services terms. So I'm hoping that actually fintech will be what pushes Islamic finance to the fore.
Brother Hizam, do you mind me adding some comments?
Sure.
Because obviously I think it'd be more beneficial for the audience if it's interactive. And I want to continue with Ms. Farah's comments and also Dr. Tariq's. I look at regulation, Dr. Tariq, being a lawyer and a Sharia guy, as something which is similar to the way you deal with crime, right? And so let's look at International Crime Surveys, British Crime Surveys come out, statistics come out every year. Being a British guy, somebody from UK will tell you this. You can never, the more regulation, the more laws you pass, you cannot really control and deter that. You can't slap a hand with a 78 sentence and say it's about education. It's about character building. And the same applies to regulation. And I think you're right. You know, industries move sometimes from complete deregulation to over-regulation, and you're always shifting. What we need to do is educate. We need to educate all stakeholders in financial or real economy, whichever industry it is, about taking responsibility, about self-accountability. This is where the future is. And I think DLT will take you there. Same with Sharia law. I have a bit of a controversial view. And despite being a Sharia scholar, I think that the industry of Islamic finance in the last 40, 50 years has made an industry out of it, a money-making industry out of Sharia law itself. Right, and I'm not a fan of having Sharia scholars who come in and have their own interpretations and change this. And there's almost what I like calling Sharia arbitrage. So you can play the game, who you go and get and whose opinion you get. It's a bit of a joke, to be honest with you, in the wider industry. Sharia law is about what Ms. Farah mentioned. It's the essence. It should be actually within the cupcake, right? So it shouldn't be something you need to laterally go and get it, Islamized. You need to go out there and get a blessing from some scholar. You need to have that ethics from day one. The problem has become today with Islamic finance, and this will probably go into Islamic fintech as well if we're not careful, is we go and structure something, whatever product it is, whether it's a legal product, whether it's actually the substance of some kind of a business out there, and we go to some Sharia scholar or some guy, and that's the same applies to lawyers and accountants and all kind of legal service providers, whether the Sharia, and they will look at it, put their own worth of interpretation based by certain benchmarks, slap a fee on that, and this it's become a self-serving industry. I feel the basic tenets of Islam, which talk about transparency, integrity, sharing, those things about not cheating anyone, those things are there. That's already inherent. We should build that into the substance and then not worry about, laterally Islamizing things, because this is where it becomes a different animal in its own self, and we're going to never be able to do any justice to that. This is where, sadly to say this is where, if you look at the Abrahamic faiths of Christianity and Judaism, they all have the same issue with interest, right? The word riba is not just Islamic word. In the Jewish language, it's ribbit. They also had the problem with interest not being allowed. Then they came to, playing with it and saying, well, up to 10% is okay. We might go the same way, because now if you look at some of our indices, they allow you 3% of benchmark, 4% this. It's not really acceptable, because, I think the time now is about digital services, accessibility, inclusion, social impact, SDGs, society, equality. This is what diversity, these are tenets which are already in Islam. The problem, the way Islam is being presented, and I'll just finish with this, sorry, is we look at law as something else, and we look at the actual substance as something else. Sharia by Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, was never designed that way. It was never about the businessmen were doing something else, and then you had to go to the Prophet or to the companions and get the legalized from them. Actually, character was built. If you look at prayer, zakat, hajj, all of these things came in Medina. They did not come in Mecca. In Meccan life, Prophet's peace be upon him built the character of people, trustworthy people, honest people. Today, the biggest problem is the bankers are cheating the system. Yeah, you look at LIBOR fixing. So it doesn't matter which regulation we come out with. Same with Sharia and Islamic finance. It doesn't matter what we do today, if we don't change people as human beings, as minds, we're never going to change anything. It doesn't matter how much regulation or Sharia law or governance you bring in.
Got it.
Sorry for going overboard with that.
No, that's very, very insightful. Dr. Tariq, you want to add something to it, actually?
Just one. I am almost totally agree with dear Sheikh Bilal. Just one addition. To my understanding, Islamic finance are almost all about rule compliance, not regulation compliance, okay? So it is about setting up the rules of the game, not, over regulation, saying something for every action, putting some restrictions for every action. I think that is the gist of the regulation issue. What I meant, if the regulation or rules, more correct, the rules comes from the players themselves, if they set up the rules of the game, it will create a more healthy and robust system. That is why I started my talk with the example from global financial crisis and Basel III. It is all about regulation, and we can see the side effects. Thank you.
This is interesting insight. While it may have diverted a bit from the topic of intercontinental bridges that that countries need to build globally, I still want to touch on the topic of regulations, of compliance. Dr. Tariq and Brother Sheikh mentioned about the dependency or getting back to the fundamental of Islam, of having trustworthy education. And then coupled with technologies, we spoke a lot about blockchain and DLT, self-governed regulation. I think one of you mentioned about it earlier, about having less restrictive regulations to be promoting innovation. I want to link this to what we've discussed to questions that were posed by Brother Ashari. Who should be responsible? If everyone were to be trustworthy, if everyone were to be nice and be in compliance, then we shouldn't have any issues, right? But we're living in a real world. Who should be responsible for the integrity and security of digital architecture? I'm opening this to any one of you in answering these questions with regards to transparency and integrity. Should there be a policing policy, or should there be some form of monitoring police to go and track? And you mentioned about just now regulations, not just about slapping on wrists.
I don't mind kicking off if I have the blessing of the other. I think it's a two-sided coin, right? And I agree with Dr. Tariq. You cannot just say that there's no regulation. I think the regulation or rules are, if there's two parties There's a bilateral agreement. Then the two parties will set the rules in terms of what they want in the contract. That's there. DLT and blockchain will allow you to disintermediate. Overall, there will always be some kind of oversight, right? And that will depend on the level of compliance, lack of compliance, the flavor of the month, how the trends are in the industry in that particular decade, that year. We cannot fix something in stone now, but the oversight body, which could be continental, intercontinental, depends on how things transgress and progress in the future. But I think what I'm talking about, yes, you're talking about the real world, but brother Hizam, in Umar bin Abdul Aziz's time, people did not know who to give zakat to. Don't tell me there was no poverty then. There was no crime. This is when you build characters and human beings. We have a cheating system today. Why do you have lawyers? You want to go to lawyers so they can skirt around the laws. You want to go to bankers and accountants so they can give you some way of cheating how to pay taxes. We have a system. Crime pays today. Crime pays, and it keeps the system going. We need to build good human beings, really, who are because ultimately we are going to suffer. Our children are going to suffer. Their generation is going to suffer. So I'm not saying we don't have any oversight or policing or any regulatory bodies. Don't get me wrong. I agree with what Ms. Farah and Dr. Tariq mentioned, but I also believe that corporate greed has got us where we are today. All these problems are, look, simply, the Silicon Valley people, yes, they're coming out with a lot of innovation, disruption, but it's the same companies that are actually tapping your phones and issues happening with Jeff Bezos and what happened with him. All of this is public knowledge. It's the same banks that talk about issues, whether it's Barclays Bank or Lloyds or Standard Chartered, and then they get penalized for 300 million fine for doing something. So we don't have good conduct. We don't have stewardship. We came from a model of shareholder, stakeholder. Now we need stewardship. Stewardship is where the future, and you have a stewardship code in the UK and elsewhere in the world. I think this is work in progress. We will never have a finished answer. As long as the heart is clean, the mind is right, the business is there, and as Dr. Tariq mentioned, you talk with each other, you set the rules of the games. There's always oversight. Ms. Farah will tell you, I will tell you as a regulator, as a lawyer, that you always need some kind of oversight. But it's a bit of the both. But let's be careful about this. There's no way that we can fix all the problems for now or the future. We will have to work on it. But I think we work on the person. You see, let me look at this. Let's look at one aspect. Corporate law over the last 200 years, commercial law, corporate law, has come up with something called corporate entity, which means that I can borrow money from anywhere, put it on the corporate entity, do an insolvency and get away with it. Isn't that what's mentioned about Donald Trump, that he's done 13,000 insolvencies in the world? Isn't this the president? So there's something wrong with our legal system. There's something wrong with human beings. We are from university days, we are telling our kids, this is the pyramid. The pyramid is not happiness at the top of the apex. The pyramid is not about sharing and what you're talking about, intercontinental bridges. It's about making the most money. So you will transgress and trample over everybody's rights and cheat the system. We need to change this pyramid. I'm not against making money, or against the idea of having bilateral trade or innovation or disruption or whatever else you want to call it. But we don't today. I'm sorry to say this. I've traveled the world. I sit on many boards around the world. You can't imagine. I'm advisor to 5 heads of states. I can tell you from my personal experience that we are in a system today, or systems, which allow you to do all of this funky crime. You can call it insider dealing, you can call it whatever it is. And unfortunately, if we don't deal with the root cause, it's like you go to a dentist, right? If you don't do the root canal treatment, you can just take the treatment from the top. That's not going to change the enamel of the tooth. Yeah. You need the root canal treatment. And there's something really deeper problematic here.
Thank you, Brother Shane. I can't help it to look at Ms. Farah's face when you mentioned about inverting the pyramid. As a regulator for Labuan IBFC, of course, one of your objectives is to help the desire of many companies to be making profit. Right? How do you put the views of creating a trustworthy culture, getting back to basic, everyone being nice, into the context of capitalism?
Well, always been a capitalist. I started my life as a stockbroker. So that takes a lot, right? But I think the era of golden gecko is done. Okay, there's just too much. The issue of equality and equity has come to the fore, and I think it's great. I think it's about time, and I digress a little bit into the issue of taxation, and there's a reason for that. Taxation now is no longer about paying the least amount of tax. Okay, taxation now is about paying a fair amount of tax. And it's the same eventually, I hope, for our children's sake. And, I have a 9-year-old, that eventually it will be about what is fair profit. It's not about making a gazillion amount of money. It is about being fair and taking pride in that. And I know it's a bit oxymoronic to have a lady who works for so-called offshore centers saying stuff like this. I go out there and I say things like, I'm into inclusion. I think that's the beauty that I'm hoping that Labuan can play a part in is the issue of inclusion. Next to Africa, Asia is the closest you're going to get where the disparity between the crazy rich Asians and very poor people is the largest. And I think this is where DLT and technology will come to the fore, and the ethics of Islamic finance and the principles will support it. And I think at the end of the day, there will be a minimum level of regulation. And that minimum regulation will be reinforced by the fact that Astana, Istanbul, Qatar, Labuan, Malaysia will come together and agree on something that we all will then carry, right? But then at the end of the day, inshallah. But at the end of the day, it is an issue of that legal entity. And to say to echo what Sheikh has been saying, it is about your niyat, your hope and your dreams and your commitment to God, right? And that nobody can regulate.
Yeah.
Right. So we can regulate the DLT. That's fine. We can regulate solvency ratios. We can regulate banking. We can regulate all that, but you cannot regulate principle. And all of us within this business of FSI, financial services, have to understand that there is a moral duty and accept it and embrace it.
Yep, and this is where I guess self-governed regulation comes into play in looking into ethics and values, and doesn't necessarily for us to need to have an ethical Sharia compliance advisors to be in the oversight committee. Yeah, Abdul, if you want to do a quick wrap up, and we'll go in sequence after this.
Okay, thank you, Brother Norhizam. I think I want to back to the topic, building the intercontinental bridge between the fintech across the country, across the continent. When we developed the Islamic digital economy in Indonesia, we start things how to digitalize the economic transactions. So I think that's very important. So everybody try to digitalize the business process. So, and then the fintech will come later after the economy already in the digital condition. So if we want to build a relationship among the other countries, across countries, across the continents, we want to start the collaborations, not only for the capital, but the collaborations need to build from the bottom layer of the economy itself. When we look at, for example, when we want to develop how we distribute the charity, the donation, the zakat, so we need to transform the digital process in the zakat distributions in the country. So let's work together. So then, and after that, we will get the many data. You can do the artificial intelligence to look at the condition of the country between the one country and the other country. And then from that, we can move to the collaborations, the next, how to link the transactions, how to move the capital, to share the distributions of the word from other country to other country. I think that's the key that we want to build together, not only Indonesia, but with our neighbor, with our all the Islamic country, and even not only for the Islamic country, but also for all around the world to build the Islamic economy in the world. Thank you, Brother Hizam.
Thank you, Pak Abdul. Brother Ayman, actually, do you want to share some parting messages?
Yeah, sure. Basically, ICD has 119 financial institutions in 55 member countries, through which we have a platform now created. And with time, we're hoping we'll be able to connect all of those financial institutions and start putting on those platforms asset management products, capabilities of doing transfers between those countries much easier, communicating with each other, because obviously all of them are Sharia compliant institutions. And with time also have all of them, because some of these financial institutions have already very good fintech capabilities and have been doing very good in enablers and inclusion of people in their countries. So I look forward to see ICD become a platform to service more and more throughout our member countries, and all of you that are speakers are in the member countries that we serve. And we're proudly and honored to do so. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I can assent to that, actually. Malaysia has been working with ICD quite significantly.
Yes, definitely. Well, Malaysia is considered a center of excellence for Islamic Development Bank, and ICD has an office within the Islamic Development Bank office there, and we definitely serving Malaysia, and Malaysia is considered my second home.
We look forward to welcome you back after the current pandemic.
Thank you so much. Take care.
Dr. Tariq, any last view or insight from you?
Sure, of course. I want to focus on two things very shortly. First one is, a solved answer, implicitly solved answer in these, talks in these organizations is whether Islamic fintech or fintech can be a mainstream, mode of finance. Honestly, in 2008, Islamic finance industry missed a great opportunity. It could be a more mainstream, but we have another opportunity, especially in the post-pandemic period. Remember, last year's World Economic Forum was focused on stakeholder capitalism. This year, they will focus on great resets. So the capitalism and financial system is going to somewhere else. Many people have seen the fact that the current system cannot go, will not take us to a good place. So some new proposal will follow. And I think the notion of risk sharing and fintech can have the potential to be the key words of the near future. So Islamic finance industry should benefit from this opportunity. What is required? We should deliver our message to the masses well. We should come up with compelling propositions and appropriate products, while truly remaining true to Sharia. Second one is Islamic banking will still be the most important part of Islamic financial system, but their current business model is not totally compliant with fintech, Islamic fintech. One reason is the problems in their liquidity management. If we go deeper to the problem, if we look at the underlying drivers, liquidity management, especially cross-border liquidity management, is quite important. One solution still, comes from the fintech world. What about, establishing an Islamic mega bank based on securitization of assets, tokenization of assets in different parts of the world, and connecting this securitized or tokenized assets through blockchain technology. So it can change the structure of Islamic banking, which will automatically affect the future of fintech, I guess. These are the two items I want to touch. Thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you, Dr. Tariq. All right, we'll move over to Brother Sheikh. We'll have the lady to do a final wrap up. Brother Sheikh, some parting messages from you.
Thank you very much. Well, actually, I would echo the same sentiments that my fellow panelists have mentioned so far. Brother Ayman Sijini, Dr. Tariq, and Brother Afdal, all of them have mentioned and very eloquently advocated their points. I would say, there's two things that are important here. Number one is education, right? And everywhere in the world, people are talking about financial inclusion and getting the kids to know about this from day one. I feel we should talk about financial ethics from day one. Primary school kids should know about ethics and responsibilities and good governance and good behavior and good consumerism and as fair profit as Ms. Farah mentions, not profiteering. All of these tenets should be taught from day one, not just about having a bank account and how you can make money and having a big car and a big house, but all about this social impact and responsible financing and responsible equity. All of these things, very important. Education is very important, and this should be a golden thread that runs throughout your entire life cycle of education from day one till the day you graduate from university. There should be a running module or something, always a compulsory module, so you come out with good human beings. It's not just somebody who has GCSEs and A levels and degrees and is a doctor and a professor, and who just looks at that's why we talk about Islamic finance, the form. There's no substance. Issues like this. Number two, I would like to follow on what Dr. Tariq mentioned about having a mega bank. I think this is a fantastic idea in terms of using the digital platform, having the token assets and all of those. But I would extend it slightly to have it respected to kind of main economy. So you have a mega agri bank which looks at digital tokens, and so that brings you, because we have a huge potential in our 57 countries on agri food. If you look at how much Turkey is dealing with, it's a gateway. Turkey is a gateway with not just in terms of, the fact that Bosphorus Sea from Mediterranean to Black Sea, how the trade routes are. They're not capitalizing what they have. Imagine if we can link all of that, food and trade, plus having a mega bank with all the digital assets. It will be amazing, right? So don't just have a bank and assets, digital assets, but have a real economy there. And similarly with healthcare. Now people go from Middle East, GCC, affluent people, when they have a health issue, they'll go to US and UK. Why do we have that? I mean, we should have healthcare tourism with digital assets in our own countries. So that's another thing that I would really talk about. And I think the final thing I want to say, which is very important, is we need to go back to basics and look at what will touch society at the bottom, grassroots. I'll give you one example. Brazil was winning a lot of the World Cup in football, soccer, right? And Germany was thinking and scratching his head, what do we do? Germans are now really good at everything. They've won the Champions League in Europe. They've won at the national. And the reason why they did this is if you go across to Germany today, every single school has its own, from grassroots schooling. Football is in the blood, is in the DNA. We need to do that. Go to the grassroots and bring champions from our school age kids.
Got it.
Really, they are techno savvy as much as you and I are. Right, and they have the ability, and I think we can have a much balanced and moderate society where there is more closer connectivity, and that's the message that you want to build from this platform: building intercontinental bridges, connectivity at the micro level, human level, individual level, and at the kind of macro level between countries and companies.
Got it. Thank you so much, Brother Sheikh. Actually, Ms. Farah.
There's not much left for me to say, except to go back to the title of the panel and to humbly request cooperation between Turkey, Astana, maybe some other centers in the Middle East, for us to come together.
Jakarta, Indonesia, yeah?
Yes, of course, Indonesia, for us to come together, right? And have a mutual recognition of some sort. For Islamic, maybe first digital, and then from there we can create a very clear road So the players and potential license holders understand that when they come to us, they are opening themselves up to all these markets. So I would really, really like to take this conversation offline and then offer this opportunity. And maybe next year, when we come back to IFW 2021, we can say that we've done it.
Wonderful. And that is a challenge that all of us should be responsible in getting it implemented. And I'm sure that El Mangos would then be able to help us in terms of facilitating it. And with that, I would like to thank each and every one of you. And I wish that these discussions can continue. My apologies to audiences who have raised questions and we can't be answering all of them. I believe that El Mangos Ventures would then be able to help to assist as well. So again, thank you so much. There has been an interesting discussion, and I look forward for our interactions in the future.